Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the absolutely wild true story of Laura Dekker. She's the Dutch New Zealander who took on both the ferocious elements of nature and the rigid structures of her own government, all for one singular goal: sailing the globe. This isn't just your standard sailing story, guys. It's a profound look at human endurance, intense preparation, and honestly, the boundaries of what we consider possible for a young person. Now, I want you to put yourself in her shoes for just a second. Really imagine this. You're standing at the helm of a 38-foot boat. You are just 14 years old. You're watching the familiar, safe coast of Europe slowly fade away into the horizon until, well, there's nothing left but water. You're completely alone. No parents, no crew, no backup boat trailing right behind you. It's just you, the boat, and the absolute vastness of the sea. Honestly, that's a pretty deeply sobering thought for most adults, let alone a teenager, right? And to put that into perspective, just look at the sheer scale of what she was staring down. 27,000 nautical miles. That is the distance she had to cover. She was facing months upon months of unpredictable weather, massive ocean swells, and total isolation. This definitely wasn't some quick weekend trip along the coast. We're talking about a massive, multi-ocean expedition where the margin for error was, frankly, virtually zero. So moving on to Section 1, Born to the Sea. To even wrap our heads around how a teenager could attempt something of this magnitude, we have to look at her extraordinary beginnings. Laura's story doesn't start in, a traditional house in the suburbs. It quite literally starts on the water. She was born in New Zealand during a 7-year sailing trip, so the ocean was really her only home. By age 6, she was already sailing solo. By 11, she bought her own yacht with a loan from her dad, because apparently a standard allowance just wasn't going to cut it. And by 13, she completed a solo crossing of the notoriously difficult English Channel. Basically, she was a seasoned, lifelong sailor before she even hit high school. Which leads us to a truly fascinating moment. When she arrived alone in the UK after that English Channel crossing, British authorities were, understandably, pretty shocked to find a 13-year-old girl all by herself. They intercepted her, placed her in a children's home, and called her father to come get her. But get this. Rather than packing her up and taking her home on a commercial ferry, he flew over and put her right back on her boat to sail back to the Netherlands alone. He trusted her skills implicitly. That brings us to Section 2, the legal storm. See, before she could even face the physical storms of the open ocean, she had to navigate a massive bureaucratic one back home. In 2009, when Laura announced her plan to circumnavigate the globe solo, the Dutch government stepped in. Now, the child welfare agencies impartially raised some very valid, heavy concerns about a minor's safety, arguing she was just simply too young to risk her life like that. But on the flip side, Laura and her family countered with some pretty undeniable evidence. She had a seaworthy boat, a meticulously planned route, and deep, proven survival skills. It became this classic clash between state protection and individual capability. And this wasn't resolved overnight, folks. It took 10 grueling months. She had to sit through 8 separate court cases and undergo intense psychological evaluations. The scrutiny was just relentless. But ultimately, the courts returned custody to her parents, ruling that she was in fact prepared. So, at 14 years old, the legal anchor was finally lifted, clearing her to cast off. All right, Section 3, Crossing the Global Oceans. Now, this was far from a reckless run. Departing in August 2010 on her bright red 12-meter ketch named Guppy, Laura set out from Gibraltar. What's absolutely crucial to understand here is her strategy. Unlike non-stop racers who just battle the worst weather for speed, Laura's journey was a highly calculated port-to-port circumnavigation. She essentially mastered the global ocean conveyor belt through 3 distinct chapters. First, the Atlantic crossing, riding the northeast trade winds down from the Canary Islands to St. Martin. Second, the Pacific leg, passing through the Panama Canal and using the south equatorial current to hit spots like the Galapagos, Fiji, and Bora Bora. And then finally, the 3rd chapter, the ultimate test. The Indian Ocean. This was her supreme ordeal. Take a look at these conditions. She faced a brutal stretch of 47 continuous days at sea. That is a 6,000 nautical mile passage entirely alone. She had to battle these massive rolling swells and terrifying 65-knot winds all the way to South Africa. And, at this level of sailing, the constant threat of equipment failure isn't just an inconvenience. It's quite literally a matter of life and death. Every single decision she made during those 47 days had to be absolutely perfect. Moving on to Section 4, the record and return. After surviving the notoriously treacherous Cape of Good Hope, Laura rode the Atlantic currents all the way back to the finish line. On January 21, 2012, she sailed into Simpson Bay, St. Martin. She had been at sea for an incredible 518 days. On that exact day, she was 16 years and 123 days old, officially completing our circumnavigation of the globe. But interestingly, the reaction to her arrival was actually completely split. Official record keepers like Guinness and the World Sailing Speed Record Council flat out refused to officially ratify the record. Why? Well, they wanted to discourage other young, potentially less prepared sailors from attempting dangerous copycat voyages. But conversely, the global maritime community was entirely in awe. To veteran sailors, this whole thing wasn't about a certificate at all. It was recognized as an undeniable testament to human endurance and supreme seamanship.
So the big takeaway here is that this voyage wasn't just some passing teenage phase or sudden craving for an adrenaline rush. Today, Laura Dekker holds a master less than 500 gross tonnage coastal license. She actually runs a teen sailing foundation now, where she teaches kids the very seamanship and survival skills that kept her alive out there on the water. Her life is and always has been intrinsically tied to the ocean.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer, and I want to leave you all with a thought. After looking at the meticulous routing, the lifelong pedigree, and the unquestionable expertise we've explored today, you really have to ask yourself, can we actually call this a reckless teenage stunt? Or was this in fact one of the most calculated, masterful navigational feats of our time? Think about what it takes to conquer the world at 16, and what that says about the limits we place on human potential.